see if I'm a Republican.
And before we get to the impact on the midterms, I am curious that the approval rating, the 43% number, that stayed stagnant from January to February. Why is that despite the disapproval moving?
Yeah, great question, Brittany. There is a segment of voters out there, and it is that roughly 40 to 45% who are ride or die Donald Trump. And, I think that number is dwindling among the electorate. I think as we get closer to the actual election, we'll see how much that changes, whether that is really a ride or die vote there, whether they can be persuaded. But this is likely voters that we're talking about, and we are expecting a lower turnout scenario among Republicans. So these are those Republicans who are going to approve of Donald Trump, and then some of those independents as well, who are unlikely to move but are still movable.
Like you said, if I was a Republican right now looking at this, running for office in 2026, these aren't numbers I want to see, especially because Republicans have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And like you said, historically, that's not good. It's almost like a bloodbath situation come midterm elections. So how is this affecting Republicans and Democrats at all?
And when we look at the generic ballot, we see, again, the largest number for Democrats here, the largest number away from Trump that we've seen in all of our polling over the past year. So 50% say that they intend to vote for a Democrat on the congressional ballot versus 42% for a Republican. 8 points there. That's an 8 point spread. We had talked last year about how this number wasn't moving that much, that Democrats and Republicans were very close. Republicans led at certain points in 2025 in our testing. That is no longer the case. That ship has sailed, and it's very unlikely to come back to the harbor here unless Republicans start doing something very differently, or unless the electorate starts to look very different from how we expect it to look in the midterm elections. We do still see that there's that lag. So there's that 12% net disapproval for Trump versus this 8%. And I think that that's really just, some folks are holdouts. They're not necessarily willing to commit to voting for Democrats, but this is still alarm bells for Republicans. This is a tough place to be.
And when you break that down by demographic, when you see that there are more people supporting the Democratic candidate, they're beating the Republican candidate 50 to 42%, and 50% of independent voters are going to the Democrat over 37% who are voting for the Republican. I mean, what trends there when it comes to demographics are popping out to you the most?
I think that independent number that you cited, that is really the most. And I think that all of these candidates are, in any sort of competitive district, they're going to be vying for those independent voters. So 50% right now of those independent voters are supporting the Democrat versus 37% for the Republican. That they're going to really have to make up some ground there. These independent voters will be decisive in some of these races. In some races, frankly, it won't matter as much because Democrats are very likely to have an advantage in some of these closer districts, or even some of the districts where Trump won in 2024. Democrats may, in fact, have an advantage there. So, that is a number that we're really looking at nationally as we try to get cues for how some of these closer districts are going to go. But Republicans are going to have to at least be tied among independents to be competitive in some of those districts.
I do now want to